Lit.
Giving go my soul.
Real. Glad. Lit. Right. The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is highly important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela continues reading from the political report to the African People's Socialist Party's 2021 plenary titled African Workers of the World, Unite and Organize. He continues in chapter 6, titled The State of the Party on page 65. You can find the study materials in the Facebook and YouTube descriptions. For the first hour, the chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we'll open it up to you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, comrade. All right. Thank you so much. First of all, Comrade Director Akile, much of what we'll be talking about this part of the political report revolves around you and your department. And that's really important that you are there. People can see you, hear you, experience you, because it gives a greater significance to the practical manifestation of the party, that we're not just an idea, we're not just talking heads, and we're making a political report that is from the plenary coming from our 7th Congress that happened in 2020. 2021, we have we're dealing now with the second plenary from that 2020 Congress. And the Congress, we have elections and things like that for the party. We sum up where we're coming from. We give a general understanding of where things are in the world in terms of the correlation of all kinds of political and economic forces and where we fit in to that. It's not just some casual discussion where we talk about this protest or that protest or something to that effect. And this is not something that I'm saying to demean or undermine the significance of protests, because they are important as means by which we advance an overall struggle for our liberation as a people. But too often, of course, the protests are not about advancing struggle for liberation. They revolve around incidents that occur under colonial domination that we experience as a people all the time. And so we engage as a political party, and people don't have an opportunity really to understand what that means. We've gone nearly 3 generations without any discussion about revolution or what revolutions are about. People have to rely on their imaginations or what the oppressor, what the colonizer, what the imperialists, what those who control our lives present to us as representative of revolution. We are going through a period now where, because of the crisis of this whole social system, and that rests that relies for a social system that relies for its existence on the continuing domination of African and other colonized peoples around the world. And because it is the struggle of colonized peoples around the world and inside this country, that is to say the United States, that contributes to and deepens, that's responsible for the crisis itself, then those who control the world, those are the colonizers of the world, now engage in deepening and redefining and helping to tweak this whole definition of reality, especially as it relates to those of us who are colonized. So we are seeing more popular movies, and we're seeing more popular expressions coming from the rulers of this country, even if it has Black faces, but that's who allow everybody to have the discussions that they're having. So we see these redefinitions of what the Panthers were about, what this Black artist was about, what this really important African influential historical figure was really about. And it's defined in a way that never challenges a design to overturn the system itself, but it defines and is summed up as something that is responsible for bringing us to this place where we are today, where there's a presumption that we are so much better off and that the work that was done before has put us in this wonderful and magnificent place. And of course, that misdirects people, and it really is not what it's all about. So we got people who have been taught that protest is okay, especially if it happens within the parameters that's acceptable to the oppressor, especially if it doesn't break the law too much, especially if it's based on nonviolence as it relates to the fight against those who oppress and exploit us. Protest is okay. And especially, again, if that protest is directed at symptoms of the problem, as opposed to the system that creates problem, the problem-making, problem-creating system that we have to deal with. And so we have people who are engaged in some kind of activity or another, and most of it, too much of it, I should say, in front of computer screens, such as what we are engaged in now. And that's the extent of much of it. Or when they see and hear about us, they only see and hear us in ways that's been predetermined. So people can see you, comrade director, is young woman who heads this incredibly powerful department that we're going to be describing now. But if we're not careful, what people will see is simply, just how bright you are, how smart you are, how clever you are, and what a great thing it is that you're doing, without seeing that they're looking at the party. This is the African People's Socialist Party. A few years ago, you were involved in a kind of political confrontation that proved to be problematic in a lot of different ways. And somebody wanted to describe this to me, a real knowledgeable person, as somehow my being responsible for misdirecting these young people, et cetera, as though this young person was separate from the fact that they are members and leading forces in the African People's Socialist Party. This is where these people were in motion, not as young people, but as members of the African People's Socialist Party. When we did an incredible event that participated on yesterday with this magnificent organization that is headed by Comrade Charles Barron, Operation Power. And he and his wife were there, and there were other important figures who were there in terms of the political history and politics of movement. And people were kind of really impressed with the deputy chair's presentation, because he has 50 different organizations or economic development things from the party. And everybody was there and said, wow, what a great thing. This is a great thing. Look at this great person. But that's the party. that you're looking at. When people are participating in this discussion and they may be able to say something is significant about me, the chairman, I am the party. This is the African People's Socialist Party that's expressing itself in 1,000 different ways. And that's what makes us significant, because as an individual, who the hell am I? You know, and as an individual, who really is any of us? Because whatever it is that we have as individuals, it didn't become meaningful until we were connected to this revolutionary project in the form of the African People's Socialist Party. So this is what gives, this is a concrete manifestation, and you are. And this document that I'm reading from, I'm just struggling that it not be understood by non-party and non-movement forces as just something, another exercise in a sort of academia or certain kind of discussion just for the sake of discussion. This is the African People's Socialist Party that we are talking about. If anything that's heard that you think is significant, this is the African People's Socialist Party. This is an organization that's designed to complete the Black Revolution of the 60s. This is an organization that's designed to make us free, not just to engage in some kind of struggle, not just to create an economic institution, not just to create a newspaper or run a radio station, but to do these things as a part of the process to negate the influence, the strength, the power of a foreign and alien force that dominates our lives. That's what we call colonialism. And so that's what is really important for us to understand. And when we go into chapter 6 now on page 65, that I'm going to begin reading from, I just want to clarify that because we are solving problems and we are making advances that are connected to making sure that our people are free. And what that means is not just some kind of abstract concept, freedom. It means that we want to move all those obstacles that stand between us, our people's ability to create life for ourselves. What it means is that we have introduced an element of science to society that has never been there before, except by the examples of forces like Marcus Garvey that really fought for a re-entry of African people back into history. Because now we are not a part of history. We've been pushed out of history, and the struggle that we engaged in is to recapture our presence in history as a social force that help to shape and define what the world looks like, not just be a response to somebody else's efforts to shape and define what the world looks like. And that's what we've been captive of for the last 600 years or so, somebody else's definition and intent to create a world. And so what we are saying is that we can ourselves define with intention the kind of world that we want to have. And that's what the African People's Socialist Party is about. That's what we are discussing today in chapter 6, State of the Party, the African People's Socialist Party. And this is, again, the 6th chapter of the political report to the 2nd plenary of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And I want to salute all of you members of the party and the Uhuru movement, no matter where it is that you're located in the United States or around the world. All you comrades in the Caribbean, in Bermuda, in the Bahamas, in various other places in the Caribbean. Those of us, as we're trying to, with more or less success of penetrating the struggle in Haiti, for those of us as I mentioned, various other places throughout the Caribbean area, to party members and Uhuru forces that are in Africa, in South Africa, Azania, in the Gambia, in Ghana, in Chad, in Mali, in Ivory Coast, and some other place I'm going to be, Tanzania, that I'm Uganda. I'm going to be sorry for starting this roll call because I know I'm leaving out places in Europe. And various other places around the world and within the United States itself. So we want to talk about the state of the party. And again, this is from the political report to the second plenary of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. I'm talking about plenaries and congresses. These are powerful entities, part of a revolutionary project. This is a revolutionary organization that is having congresses. We've had 7 congresses since our founding as a party in 1972. And it's been difficult to have these congresses on a regular basis as we have been doing now for this last few congresses, just in terms of the era in which the party grew up in and all of the forces of reaction that we had to contend with, and all our own ineptitude and the fact that we didn't have much experience doing what it is we're trying to do. And because we are a party of the African working class in composition, as well as in terms of principles that we believe in terms of the working class of having profound leadership in this revolutionary project. And so we now talking about our 7th Congress. And this is something, despite all the efforts that the United States government and other forces around the world who enjoyed living off the blood, the sweat of African and oppressed peoples around the world, everything they've done to try to make sure that we didn't exist before, the assassinations, the brutal murders of leaders and revolutionary forces around the world, similar to what's happening now in Myanmar. Similar to what we see happening in Yemen, similar to what we see happening in places like Syria, similar to what's going on in Haiti. All around the world, oppressed people rising up, and our oppressors using every method that possible that's available to suppress that, to make that not happen. We are still here. And we have fought against this tide of reaction that's killed, murdered, maimed us to keep us from being here. And now we're talking about dealing with chapter 6, the state of the party, from the political report to the second plenary of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. Remarkable history, just that in and of itself. So I'm on page 65. And chapter 6, the state of the party. A review of the party's work since the 7th Congress, first plenary, held just a year ago, reveals that our Congress and plenary mandates are generally sound and do not require fundamental changes. So we're talking about what's happening since the 7th Congress and since the 7th Congress first plenary, and how things seem to be going okay. We laid out a whole assessment of the world, our place as a people and party in this world that's still dominated, even if shakily, by US imperialism and all the other imperialism around the world. This is what we are looking at. We're not just looking at what happened with the last police killing in St. Petersburg, Florida, or some other places, and they are ubiquitous, the murder of our people by organs of the state. We are saying this is where we fit into that process. This is how we assess our situations in that process, and what a protest or a demonstration should mean, what it should look like, and how it should affect our struggle going forward. And we say this not just as an individual and organization, with the intent, with a program to overturn this relationship that we have with imperialism. The party's work, growth, and influence in the past year has been tremendous. However, the implementation of the mandates of the 7th Congress has been uneven. I want to address some things that leading party departments and mass organizations must understand and undertake in order for us to fully carry out the mandates and resolutions. Various mandates and resolutions were the outcome of our party's 2018 Congress. We're talking about mandates and resolutions. In other words, this is not just some anarchy. This is not something I woke up this morning and thought we should do this and do that, even though we wake up this morning thinking we should do this and that, but all of it occurs within the context of carrying out mandates and resolutions that were designed to get us from this place to our freedom, to our liberation, and to the next step in our liberation. And every plenary that we do, that when we have this kind of report coming from, is part of the measurement, part of how far we've gone and whether we've done it correctly and what we can do to improve our work to get from this place to that place. This is not a protest meeting. This is not a conference to see whether we were effective in getting our protest signs done and whether our security was correct for this or that. That happens in smaller meetings. That happens in other kinds of sessions that should be something that says this is how this protest, this sign, this what that we are doing should contribute to the long-term interest, to the end that we are projecting for our freedom as a people. The 2020 plenary provided an opportunity to review our work up to that point, to improve our work, and improve on the mandates and resolutions from our 7th Congress. During 2020, our work has gone generally well. We have held to our mandates and continue to carry out our Congress resolutions. It is up to the different regions, departments, organizations, and cadre of the party to assume responsibility for all the party's work through the regional strategy. This plenary process will provide the opportunity for further review and evaluation of our work to realize our mandates and resolutions. Therefore, I will not spend much time here elaborating on the mandates. I will instead discuss some of the things necessary for our success in carrying them out. Agitprop, that is, must be built as a function of African state power. We have quite appropriately extolled the leadership of Comrade Director Akili Anayi over the Department of Agitprop and Propaganda. She has put the department on course in an unprecedented manner. However, the party must do more to demonstrate unity with our often repeated declaration of the essential role of the Department of Agitprop. We must move to develop the department based on the recognition of its role and the unceasing growth in the quantity and complexity of its responsibility. Comrade Akili must be given the tools to make the Department of Agitation and Propaganda competent to carry out the task mandated by our 7th Congress. Few organizations can boast of the resources our party has developed over the years that forward the Department of Agitation and Propaganda's mission of production and distribution of ideas. In the perennial war of ideas we're engaged in with our imperialist oppressors and exploiters. Our newspaper, radio stations, fundamental political education process, and decades of archived political history must become even more effective to take us to victory. Comrade Akili has carried out various reforms within the Department of Agitprop. Remove the deadwood that was incompetent, incapable of, or unwilling to contribute to our mission of a liberated and united Africa and African people under the leadership of the advanced detachment. That's a profound sentence there. Comrade Akili has carried out various reforms within the Department of Agitprop. And what that means, she has removed the deadwood that was incompetent, incapable, or unwilling to contribute to our mission of a liberated and united Africa and African people under the leadership of the advanced detachment. In other words, it's not just something putting out a newspaper or having a radio program. It's all connected to the liberation of our people under the leadership of this advanced detachment, which is absolutely necessary if we're going to overturn our oppression. She has organized workshops and initiated conferences designed to make the department more powerful as an instrument of our revolution. However, to effectively develop the department at this, department at this critical time, when the crisis of the colonial capitalist system has become existential, expeditious development of the department means that Comrade Akili's approach must center on building the various institutions of Agitprop. While Agitprop has authority over several distinct compartments, we must clearly determine what it takes for each of them to succeed and develop as part of a comprehensive organized whole. The Burning Spear is one of the most reputable institutions of the African liberation movement globally. It is a reliably produced journal of the party. However, we need much more. We need a plan for development that includes winning greater, more productive participation in the Spear process by party members and by the colonized African population in general. This includes writing for the Spear by party and movement members and by the members of our global colonized African community. This means an actual efficient process of Spear distribution that is centered in our headquarters, but connected in every part of the world through First of all, party members who sell the spear as central to their day-to-day political and organizational work, and through street and market vendors and bookshops globally. The number of party and movement members vigorously and consistently selling the spear enhances our direct contact with the masses of our people. It means that African internationalist leaders are moving throughout the African colony wherever we are located in the world. The spear must be increasingly written for members of the party and our movement as the primary audience. This also introduces the party to thousands of people who will receive direct information about us, opening them up to recruitment into a revolutionary organization they will be able to much better understand through the pages of the spear. Non-party and Uhuru movement members must experience reading the spear as if looking over the shoulders of the African working class. This means we must not see the primary task of the spear to be impressive essays designed to influence petty bourgeois intellectuals. The spear is in the business of creating African working class intellectuals, practical African internationalists. Currently, the Burning Spear's editorial content is primarily organized around our 14-point platform and presentations by different party organizations or leaders, including the African National Women's Organization, the Office of the Deputy Chair, the Chairman's editorial, etc. In the recent period of rebuilding our movement, much of our recruitment work is focused on those who might be considered advanced forces, already having a level of political and/or ideological maturity that could be rather rapidly developed. We now have a stable core of these members who are capable of taking our politics and ideology to the working class in their own mass way. The spear must work toward printing more pages that are dedicated to reports on struggles of the African working class that speak directly to the class. All party members and others from the African working class must be able to write for the spear, helping the party to spread African internationalist ideology, organization, and training throughout the colony. And I just want to say, we say that people should be able to write for the spear. And the spear has standards, of course. It's an excellent journal when it speaks to real journalistic kinds of qualities. Of course, those mostly established, by the bourgeoisie and even pre-bourgeoisie publications bourgeois publications that might have occurred throughout Europe and much of the world. But we have to also make it possible for the African working class, for the advanced attachment to speak to the class, for the African working class to speak to itself. And that means that we will tweak and change some of the traditions that usually required for publication in journals. I mean, certain things obviously we have to continue to do, like who, what, when, where, and sometimes how, why, and in terms of making sure that kind of stuff is placed, in the newspaper, so that when people read it, there's certain references that's absolutely necessary. But we don't have to say it all the time, like how it's been taught to us to say it. This is something that the Department of Agitprop has to look at, and we've done this in the past. So it's not something that we have to invent. We want to maintain making sure what should be in that article is in that article, but the language and how people say it, I think is something that's really important for us, so that the class can speak to itself, that it doesn't have to go through some other medium to speak to itself. That when this newspaper is read by somebody who's in a food stamp line, or somebody who's in some kind of welfare situation, or somebody who's living in the townships, we shouldn't have to always go through somebody else to interpret that. We should have the ability to speak directly to that person in the language that the people understand, and sometimes in a fashion that people understand it. Understanding ourselves, exactly who our audience is. And that means that people who live in that township, people who occupy those food stamp lines and welfare lines and things like that, need to be able to write about it, need to be able to write. And when they write about it, they're speaking to other people just like themselves in the housing projects and other kinds of places and the prisons. They're speaking out. That gives the ability of the class of African workers to speak directly to themselves, minimizing the influence of some medium that through which they have to go to talk to each other. Anyway, this is part of what we anticipate. I know we can't do this overnight, but this is the kind of thing that we have to do. And we say that this would even include ideological and political struggles against opportunists and other class enemies in our communities. Such articles for the working class would constantly reference the party's 14-point platform, rules of party discipline, and even principles of party organization as means of reinforcing party members and recruiting others into the party and movement with a higher level of unity from the beginning. So articles should be talking about, when we say we did this and that, we should constantly reference our 14-point platform, the rules of party discipline, principles of party organization. And this helps to reinforce party members. And it helps to recruit others into the party and the movement with a higher level of unity from the beginning. I think this is really important because people come in to the movement otherwise having these idealized assumptions of what being a revolutionary, being in the party is all about. And because of that, when they get into the party and get into the real world that our people are having to contend with, as opposed to this idealized version of the world that the African petty bourgeoisie and other petty bourgeois forces have created, when that happens, of course, this is a conflict that sometimes people cannot deal with, and they don't come into the party as good party forces. We train people how to be in the party. That's why we say people who read this newspaper should be experiencing as if looking over the shoulders of the African working class. This is what we do. We are speaking directly to the class and everybody else and to the oppressed of the world. That's who we're writing for, which isn't to say that we don't do the kinds of essays around critical questions and things like that, but we got a newspaper with the 14-point platform, which is critical. We got newspapers with rules of party discipline in the newspaper itself. We got splendid articles that deal with the question of women or international articles dealing with what's happening in Africa and how they should be explained. We have articles on political economy, on our economic development projects. People go there every issue, they see that. And then they can also be seeing what I'm saying, that is to say, people are saying about what's happening in housing projects, what's happening in these situations in the townships, et cetera. And when they can see themselves reading about what's happening in the townships, then they are more inspired to read and understand what that means about the 14-point platform, what the international article that Carmen Louise de Kinshasa is writing about what's happening in this place in Africa or this place in Europe or the rest of the world. They more easily understand the relationship of the economic development projects that we are talking about to everything else. And this helps people to see that the relationship between the political and the economic, that they are one. And so this is what we're talking about, how this really facilitates the ideological development, not only members of the party and our movement, but the African community and the people at large in the world. That is to say, we give them this perspective, we give them this understanding from the perspective of the African working class leadership through its advanced detachment. So I think the Burning Spear issues of the 1970s and 80s provide examples that may be emulated today. The more we succeed in bringing the African masses into the process of spear production and distribution, the more the spear will look and sound like the people. The working class, now armed with African internationalist philosophy, analysis, program, and organization, will be made manifest in the person of the party organizers who brave all circumstances to put the spear in every hand. Selling and distributing the spear is part of the process of building party organizations by existing units of the party and extending the organizational growth to previously untapped sources. This understanding must be included in the plans for the development of the spear. And we must have a plan for spear development designed to take us to a higher level of performance in our ongoing contest with the ideas of the colonial national oppressor and exploiting class. The spear must be seen by party members as our primary weapon in the anti-colonial class war. Party members must understand this function of the spear in defeating our enemy and liberating our people. Again, the spear provides every member of the party the capacity to wage war of liberation all day, every day, and almost everywhere. This is the weapon of the people, right here. This is your AK-47. This is your IED, going through the communities, arming the people with revolutionary theory, revolutionary practice, revolutionary tactics and strategy, and understanding of the reality we're confronted with. This is the war that we engage in all the time. And this is something that party members must come to understand. And this is what our Agitprop, Department of Agitprop, will help us to understand. And the Burning Spear is just one of those institutions that will facilitate that. So a close relationship with the spear by all party members helps us to reconstitute a burning spear culture within our party. It enhances the political education of our party members, who must take the spear out to the masses and help to explain and interpret its content in opposition to the propaganda of our oppressors. Every party member is therefore transformed into a leader within her sphere of operation, on the job, the campus, neighborhood, prison, and within her party organization. Every member is drawn deeper into the organizational embrace of the party, that the spear distribution is constantly growing. This must be seen as essential work, essential to rapid political development of party members, essential to arming party members to play informed roles in supporting and recruiting for our mass organizations and for recruiting in general, essential in connecting every party member and organizational unit globally with every other party member and organizational unit everywhere. We have to solve the problem of getting the spear into the hands of party organizations, members, and others throughout the world. It is not acceptable that we are less capable in 2021 of getting the spear to comrades internationally than we were 30 or 40 years ago, when the spear was an ubiquitous presence globally. I will never forget the day in 1983 when I walked into a Black militant-owned bookstore in London and was confronted with the scene of a white man, a Brit, holding court in the middle of the floor, a copy of the spear, baton-like, in his hand, declaring it to be the best source of revolutionary analysis and information in the world. More than 100 years ago, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, UNIA-ACL, used extraordinarily creative methods of distributing the Negro world, its journal, and the most widely read and appreciated newspaper in the African world. Obviously, this was before some of the methods of communications available today. In some places, the Negro world was banned by colonial administrators, but the UNIA was nevertheless successful in getting the newspaper to our colonized people. Sometimes it was distributed by African seamen who sewed the paper in the linings of their coats and found the other effective methods of struggling the paper where it needed to go throughout the world. Of course, the key to success for distributing the Negro world was the rank and file members whose imagination was unleashed by the anti-colonial unity within the movement. And I'm thinking about an instance that I became familiar with when the Vietnamese people were fighting against the colonial domination, specifically by the United States. And this example of how, because the repression was so ubiquitous, because the arm of the neo-colonial state and under the influence of the United States government, CIA, and all other kinds of intelligence organizations made it almost impossible to communicate our ideas and words of the revolutionary Vietnamese people fighting against colonial domination. how in the middle of the night, sometimes the comrades who had the responsibility of getting the propaganda and the materials out to the masses of the people would go to the top of buildings, and they would use flyers that they had wet down and place them in locations on the top of buildings. And when the sun would come out and would dry the papers that were left before the people, and the wind would take the papers, they would fly all over the city, and the people would have access to this information from the revolution. This was recognition by the Vietnamese Revolution of the significance of being able to engage in this combat, ideological combat, engage in this war of ideas, to break out of the blockade that's imposed on us by our colonial bosses, masters, the ones who control our lives, one who control, generally speaking, every capacity that we have to communicate with each other, that we even have to be careful during this discussion, because we know that, and we have seen it, even during the last study, if I'm not mistaken, that we did, how in the comment section, the forces were able to take down our statements from people because they'd characterized as hate speech or something to that effect. The ability for us to communicate with each other is a critical question, and these are problems that we are always engaged in trying to solve. And this is what Comrade Akile Anai and the Department of Agriprop are constantly working with, figuring this out so that we can make sure that we can break out of this blockade that's been imposed on our community, blockade of information, blockade of ideas, to contribute to the liberation of the brains of the colonized people so that we can engage in this struggle successfully to overturn colonialism. So Comrade Director Akile must require her Agitprop team to answer the question of what it would take to do this and all other things not mentioned. The answer to this question must inform the work of Agitprop. Here we are talking about internal organizational strategy, the question of personnel, materials, and technical resources, and a firm grasp of the significance of this critical moment in the history of our relationship with colonial capitalism. We are also talking about an enhanced understanding of and unity with this mission by rank and file party members. We must advance now. Similarly, our radio work must move beyond the current limitations of simply holding the fort. It is not appropriate for this work to function at the level of a mom and pop organization. And while this means we must do everything necessary to professionalize our operation, including adequate, up-to-date equipment, it means more than this. We have to modernize our radio work. And while this does necessarily mean cutting-edge equipment, the truth is that we can anticipate a time when the enemy restrictions and embargoes will mean we will be denied even the equipment currently available to us. What then will win sympathy with our cause and grow and maintain the people's unity with and loyalty to our struggle to defeat colonialism? Modern equipment is important, but it is not advanced equipment that will take us to victory. It is the political line and our efficiency in promoting it. Efficiency means whether we speak the language familiar to the people and tell the story the oppressed masses need for their advancement, and whether the story is told in a manner that reflects the cultural mores and requirements of our people and our class. Also, does our programming reflect intent to achieve definite political and economic outcomes? Our radio work must also take advantage of our global presence as a party. And, you know, I'm talking about our radio work, and I want to express appreciation to Comrade Akile Anai for the Black Power 96 work that I know she has made it possible for the party to connect with, even with this discussion we're having now. And we have some incredibly significant and powerful forces who we are familiar with, who have the advantage of having access to Black Power 96.3. And these are people who are learning more and more about our politics, and hopefully will be influenced by our politics. But we say that our radio work must also take advantage of our global presence as a party. This must be reflected in our programming that can air across various time zones and in various languages that reflect the linguistic diversity of the African nation. Our radio work can have 24-hour, mostly live programming being heard in one part of the world in familiar languages and in another part of the world at another time in other languages. In fact, our radio work can contribute to language studies that can contribute to our people achieving greater competence in speaking to each other in different languages without having to go through the colonizer for interpretation. A serious economic component must also be built within our radio work. A realistic budget has to be developed that includes what is needed for effective radio. A realistic budget must be developed that includes what is needed for effective radio production. We must develop a full-time capacity for acquiring donors and underwriters to bring in the money contributing to equipment attainment and paying stipends to some staffers. We must organize a dedicated program to win supporters to endow money to underpin our radio work. And we must also maximize our efficiency in addressing Africans and the peoples of the world through effective utilization of the necessary computer software application devised for spreading our message far beyond the normal broadcast range. Our radio and spear work will require divisions of labor concentrated in actual departments within Agitprop. The same is true of Agitprop's political education work. Here again, it is necessary for Agitprop to place the immediate leadership of our political education work in the hands of a dedicated department that works solely in or primarily in that area. A news department within our radio work can play a similar party building organizing role that our newspaper work is designed to do. We can tie our radio and Burning Spear Online and print news departments to hundreds of news reporters and potential organizers throughout the African world, men and women, cadre, who will investigate the conditions of the people and report on them through the philosophical lens of African internationalism, while drawing them into a closer embrace of our party. These so-called reporters will be connected to the people and to each other while often leading political struggles through party organization. These reporters will make it unnecessary for the dispersed African nation, separated by colonial borders, to depend on the colonial ruling class to explain or interpret our reality. We will be able to destroy the colonizers' myths of fundamental divisions among ourselves and solidarity with our oppressors wherever we may be located. Yeah, because you grow up with a worldview that's limited to your world as it is experienced through the limitations placed on us by colonialism. And Africans in various places of the world grow up being taught by the oppressors how Africans in other places around the world don't like us, hate us, or oppresses us. We the first, we sold each other, we were opposed to each other. This is where we get our understanding of the world. We need to be able to talk directly to each other so that we will find when we do this that our experiences is essentially the same. Whether we live in this place, Haiti, that's characterized as Haiti, or the other part of the island that they call the Dominican Republic, where the French colonized us under colonial slavery, and the Spanish colonized us under colonial slavery. Both of them are European white powers. One spoke French, the other spoke English, and they imposed certain colonial relationships on us that continue to plague us today. They created the ideas, they are the ones who created the ideas of mulattoes and race and things like that confound us even today. Because this thing that we're talking about is part of the ideological prop, the ideological foundation of colonial domination that makes it unnecessary for the white man to come and do his own work. We do it for him because he's got our brains. He's got us believing in the system that he created for his advantage. And so this is why Agitprop is so important too, because we break that down so that here you're on the same island and you have the notion, of course, it's created because African revolution in Haiti threatened the whole capitalist social system, to threaten to destroy it all. and created rules and things like that that assaulted capitalism as it was being created through colonial slavery. And I mean capitalism on the whole island. Capitalism as it related to what was happening in French control part of the island and Spanish control part of the island. And the capitalism that and the revolution in Haiti made it at one time so significant that there was a place called Spanish Haiti. And the Spanish Haiti was now what we know as the Dominican Republic, because forces there wanted to be a part of this revolutionary project. If you want to look at part of the differences that you see happening between Africans in what they call the Dominican Republic and Haiti today, you are looking at a part of a struggle that was imposed on us by those who control both parts of that island and wanted to make sure that the Haitian Revolution was not something that continued to unfold, that could liberate African people, not only on that island, but throughout the world. That's what we're looking at. And that's why agitprop is so important, so that we can talk to each other and don't have to go through the oppressor, so that we can speak to each other in Spanish and we can speak to each other in Creole or French or any other language that's significant to us. It's our freedom that we have to fight for, and agitprop will help us to engage in this war of ideas that will cross all these borders, ideological borders, physical borders that has been imposed on us by colonial slavery. So, this enhances, let me just say, agitprop will continue developing the discrete departments where custody of our political education is located. Teacher training will be provided by this office that will also keep record of the level of ideological growth and training of every member and the quantity of political education received by every party organization. New member schools for recruits who have recently come into our ranks in sufficient numbers must be mandated. This enhances the stability of the party organization and improves the democratic involvement of party members and party decision-making with members who can make better informed decisions. It also offers protection of the party and new party members from dishonest forces who have occasionally wormed their way into our ranks, as well as the enemy agents and provocateurs who are always looking to cause dissension within the ranks of the party and the overall liberation movement. Agitprop must also continue the development, and Comrade Kila, you know what I'm talking about. We've experienced this even in your young age and what have you. You've had to contend with those kinds of worms who have come into the party and were able to confuse people because of lack of political and ideological development. But we want to make that nearly impossible. So agitprop can also continue to develop the program for development of agitprop skills throughout the party and movement. A minimum level of agitprop skills must be provided and reproduced throughout our structures. All the party organizations must have the skills regularly honed by agitprop to carry out basic agitprop related work throughout our party, down to the unit level, and within our mass organizations and general mass work. Agitprop training has to include winning party members to an understanding of how to organize political discussions, debates, and other politicizing educational events throughout the colony, especially among the African working class. And, Comrade Kafing and I, Omawale Kafing and I, we did a lot of that in Vine City, right there in Atlanta, Georgia, right in the working class. While you had all these universities and things like that, and African intellectuals and petty bourgeois forces, radicals, having these discussions on college campuses, we were right there in the heart of the African working class communities, where African working people would come together and we discussed this question, whether we're Africans or we just Black people, et cetera. And these were forums that we set up where people are not supposed to be having these kinds of discussions, where we've been left out of the discussions altogether, whether we're Americans, et cetera, set up debates. And even have your local NAACP person to sit in as a part of what it is that we are debating. Are we Americans, Afro-Americans, Africans? We've done that right there in Vine City. And this is where the working class people ourselves get an opportunity to engage in these discussions and to become more politically and ideologically developed in the process of doing that. This is what gives the revolution roots among the African working class in the most essential locations of our population. So this will also enhance the value of party cadre doing general mass work within our areas of operation, even when this mass work is initiated by non-party members and organizations whose activities reflect our general line and strategy. And especially when this work offers greater opportunity for winning recruits for our party, organization, and/or strategic allies for our revolution. I'm not going to attempt elaboration on every possibility, and many of the things I have mentioned already are being contemplated or actually carried out by Agitprop. I know that. This stuff, I'm speaking of some stuff that's already happening, but the general membership needs to be aware of this as well. You people who are members, comrades who are members of the party, members of the Uhuru movement need to be aware of this, because that's the only thing that can help you also become participants, conscious participants in contributing to the effectiveness of what it is that's being discussed. So the main thing to be considered is the centrality of building and enhancing the entire Agitprop department in the immediate period. Often when we talk about what is necessary to build Agitprop, we do so with the vague assumption that this is something that will be accomplished down the line. This is philosophical idealism. There's no time for that. We must begin now with an actual comprehensive plan of action. The main thing about Agitprop has to do, the main thing that Agitprop has to do is determine what is needed by way of human and material resources and how they will be deployed as they are being attained. The party must do what is necessary to help Director Akili acquire and mobilize the necessary resources, especially human resources. These human resources must also include skillful assignment of forces from among the hundreds of those recruits coming into our solidarity front with skills that may be useful for developing the department. We cannot overstate the success of much of the party's strategy depends on the strength and efficacy of the Department of Agitation and Propaganda. Since our 7th Congress and last year's plenary, we have continued to learn more about the power of ruling class social media. Currently, social media platforms afford us the potential for communicating with millions of people globally. The fact that a few million Africans have viewed my January 2019 presentation at Oxford University shows our potential even as the ruling class imposes more limitations on social media accessibility. However, this potential is far from being realized. The truth is that all the ruling class intervention is often evident in our social media work. We are years behind optimal utilization of this medium. We must build a component of Agitprop that is dedicated to this project under the leadership of our party. And I just want to say also that we have to also look at the issue of creating our own independent capacity with social media. Because at one time, while this social media was seen as this means of some kind of democratic participation by masses of people in communications and things like that, it's clear that was folly. It's all folly. Living under colonial capitalist domination, it means virtually everything that comes from the colonial capitalists will be used by the colonial capitalists for the same purpose that colonial capitalism does everything else. That's to maintain its supremacy, its domination of the oppressed peoples of the world. Therefore, we have to, even when we look at this, we have to now be involved in creating our own independent capacities to the extent that is possible today. Because we know and we see, we are experiencing how the colonial capitalists are doing everything they can to limit our access to the people, to each other, et cetera. So we can't know that's happening and not be responding to it, not be planning how we're going to deal beyond the limitations that they will attempt to impose on us. This is Agitprop. This is the discussion we're having now in terms of developing the revolutionary capacity. This is part of what the political report to the plenary, this is part of what it's all about. This is part of summing up where we are, what it is that we have to do. Again, not just to have a demonstration, but to make the revolution happen, to give strength and power to the revolution. And it's also recognition that when we talk about strength and power to the revolution, we're talking about a process that neutralizes, eliminates the power of the colonial capitalists, the power of the capitalists, the colonialist forces over our lives, negate it, creating our own independent capacity. That's part of what the whole revolutionary struggle is about, to be able for the people to carry out our own mission to create the kind of society and the life and the world that we design is important and necessary for us. And that means that we have to get rid of this parasite. We have to replace the parasite. It's not enough just to complain about the parasite. It's not enough just to even create our own institution, but these institutions must be designed to eliminate, to liquidate, to remove the colonizer from our lives, from any capacity over our lives. And if we do that, that's part of the process of destroying the parasite, because the parasite must have a host in order to exist. And the colonizers are the host that provides for the life of the colonizer, as well as the colonial ruling class itself. So this is what we have to deal with. Colonialism creates the colonizer and it creates the colonized. And if you destroy colonialism, you destroy both the colonizer and you destroy the colonized. We have free people at that point. So we say, we are now at that place where we move beyond the mandates and resolutions of our congresses and plenaries. We must carry out those mandates and resolutions. But in so doing, we are always informed of our quest to defeat colonial capitalism and lead our forcibly dispersed and colonized nation to liberation. This means that Agitprop, like all our organizations, must carry out immediate tasks as part of the mission to capture the power to actually govern. While carrying out immediate tasks, Agitprop must be envisioned as the developing Ministry of Communications for our dispersed liberated nation. Listen, what this means, comrades, is that if you're with Agitprop or any department, you have to be jealous of the colonizer's ability to intervene into that space. You must really have a problem with the colonizers being able to communicate directly to our people. You must really recognize the need to eliminate that intervention by the colonizer in that space. That's what the task is. It's not just to coexist with it, it's to eliminate its capacity. We are seeing how the development of the social system itself is affecting the continuing existence of certain mediums. Even in the city that I'm located now, I understand what has been long-standing newspaper, understand will go out of business next month. Well, bully, I'm not gonna shed a tear for that. And we see newspapers around this country doing that, but that's their newspapers. We create the newspaper, develop the news reach of the colonized to speak to ourselves. And you will see that what they are calling outdated is something that will really resonate among the colonized people of the world. African people everywhere will grow our newspaper, will grow our other capacity to communicate with each other and to bring revolutionary ideas to the people that contribute to our liberation. So also coming out of the 7th Congress, 2nd Plenary, Agitprop has to better define, develop, and implement the structural relationship between its central office and Agitprop forces throughout our structures in every organization of the party. This includes local and party unit, burning spear agents, and literature distributors. Agitprop must also use this plenary to initiate resolutions mandating accountable, perennial study of the party's 14-point working platform. Every local party organization and unit must engage in this study to learn and interpret the platform at regular, weekly, party meetings, and sometimes at group studies called just for this purpose. Every party member immediately attached to a party unit must also be mandated to carry out this basic study. This is the way we guarantee the achievement of an African internationalist foundation. But every member of the party, every party organization must be mandated to use points from the 14-point platform as the political education at the top of our standard party agenda. I've written this fully understanding that this platform will have to be revised moving forward to reflect the global presence of our party organizations and members. While it does reflect our African internationalist worldview, the 14-point working platform was written at a time when the party had not achieved this global presence and was primarily based within current US borders. This, along with regular study of the pages of the Burning Spear, helps to decentralize and democratize party knowledge. It must be understood as vital to our task of creating the colonized working class intellectuals that we have talked about. It's a major blow to the assumption of the monopoly of ideas and intellectual work by the African petty bourgeoisie, who, notwithstanding occasional protestation to the contrary, generally function as funnels of colonial capitalist philosophy into the midst of the colonized. All of our work is influenced by the incredibly deep crisis of imperialism. When we say the crisis is existential, we are at the same time positioning ourselves for the eventuality of seizing the power of self-government. We are positioning ourselves as the strategic tool of the African working class and toilers of the world to destroy colonialism and unleash the forces of socialist revolution globally. The Department of Agitation and Propaganda must prepare for this event as a catalyst and as part of the global infrastructure for international Black power under the leadership of the African working class. The development of Agitprop requires its capacity to envision itself to be an arm of an independent global African working class state. This is what carrying out the 7th Congress mandates and resolution must ultimately facilitate. This outcome is implicit in all our Comrade Director Akile. It's 9:06. And what I want to know is whether I should continue reading or whether we should break down for participation by the people who are participating in the study. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, I think it might be a good time to stop. And it's like a clear-cut section that we can come back to next week. And we do have questions coming in, and also at least a couple from last week. So I think it'll be good to stop here. So I just want to thank you, Chairman, so much for this study again, and just this part in the political report, which you're right, a lot of talking about the state of the party is dealing with laying out, what Agitprop, what this department needs to carry out, what it needs to focus on, and the purpose for that, the reason why we have to envision ourselves beyond where our capacity is today, and that what we're doing is all a part of the struggle to defeat colonial capitalism, and that's what everything we do has to be focused on. And it's so clear, and that is what gives me confidence, and the whole department and all its participants confidence in being able to carry out the mandates and resolutions. So really appreciate this profound study and this section on Agitprop, because I am biased. So thank you, Chairman.
And jealous, right?
Yes, and extremely jealous. So, because I want it all. So,
right.
So thank you, Chairman. So before we take questions,
99 and a half just won't do.
Just won't do.
100%. Yeah.
Gotta have 100. So we're gonna first acknowledge where people are watching from, then we're going to take some of those questions. So we have St. Louis, Missouri, St. Petersburg, Florida, San Diego, California, Occupy Tanzania, South Africa, Columbia, Missouri, Oakland, California, Battle Creek, Michigan, Pinellas Park, Florida, Orlando, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Toronto, Canada, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Newark, New Jersey, Lakeland, Florida, South Carolina, Riverview, Florida, Branson, Missouri, Richmond, Virginia, Jamaica, Louisville, Kentucky, Palm Beach, Florida, Irvington, New Jersey, Hempstead, New York, Fort Myers, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, and Brooklyn, New York on the line today. So Uhuru, thank you guys for tuning in. And we're going to take a look at two questions that came in last week. And one actually, Chairman, you kind of already dealt with just a moment ago, but this came from Comrade Diop, and he asked for you to speak on the historic relationship that the neo-colonial state of the Dominican Republic has with the Haitian Revolution. And he was referencing your presentation that you made in an address about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a really interesting and convoluted kind of story, because we don't get a clear story about the Haitian Revolution, and even about much of what we see happening throughout the Americas. And also some of what has come to be defined as racism and things like that, they had not been clearly consolidated in terms of definitions, and we had not developed the revolutionary capacity that recognized the science of society and the relationship of the way that people go about, societies go about getting their living. That is the economic base, the relationship of the economic base to the superstructure of the society, and recognizing that capitalism was born as a world economy stemming from colonialism. And therefore, this is the way that the world achieved its existence for a period of time. And when I say the world, I mean that when you look at society, when you look at, you're looking at dialectical relationship, the world is now something that is not just different countries existing in some casual relationship to each other, with the advent of colonialism, which is another mode of production, by the way, which is something that the party has introduced into the whole science of society, that you didn't just have capitalism leaping into, feudalism leaping into capitalism. Another mode of production was introduced into this project, that's colonialism. And colonialism changed the whole world. And so now the world is interrelated. So it's not just these casual relationships that countries had to each other. It is a world economy that connects the whole world together. And from that world economy, that stems also a superstructure, that is to say, the institutions, that even includes governments and things like that, culture, and the ideological foundation of this new base of economic base, which is colonialism. And so that's where you hear racism and ideas. And so you have the situation where, particularly in Haiti and what came to be known as the Dominican Republic, you have these ideas. You had mulattoes, and you had similar to what they've done here in other places around the world, where we get divided and defined not simply by skin color, but that was a part of it because we were the children of the colonizers, and because there was this philosophy that was created that bestialized the African as justification of the colonizer having power over the white man, having power over the rest of us. We were beasts, we were just savages, etc. And so that you found white people, or so-called mulattoes, or so-called people who are from the indigenous population who were married into the Spanish forces. They had a sense of superiority. This is founded on this is a philosophy. This is founded a part of the superstructure of an economy based on slavery, on enslaving African people. And so they are superior because they got Spanish colonizers' blood running through their veins. That permeates the entire social system. It did in Haiti, and to a lesser and to a more exaggerated way in what they call the Dominican Republic, where you had 73% of the people were not white, but they were able to define themselves as not being Africans. And you had something like 11% of the people who were quote unquote Africans. All of them are Africans. But this kind of philosophy inflamed and formed there, and then the colonizer enriched or made possible for the so-called mulattoes and other things to be more affluent, to get more resources, get better education and things like this. So there was a material differences that was created by the colonizers here. And we've seen, like you had this guy, Rafael Trujillo. This is in like 1937 and whatever, but before then, you should understand that the Haitian Revolution influenced the whole world, so that even in that part of the island that was dominated by the Spanish-speaking colonizers, you had a situation on that where they wanted to become part of the Haitian Revolution because they didn't achieve independence until something like 1822. So by 1804, the so-called Haiti is liberated, And then you had from French, and now you have the Spanish who was in fighting against the French at one point about who was going to control the entire island. And now you have their children and their colony directly under their influence. They in 1822, I think it was, where they become independent. You had sectors of them who were actually rebelling and trying to become a part of Haiti. So there was actually a Spanish Haiti as it was characterized, and Haiti was the political power over all of them. And then all of the colonizers were able to disrupt all of that through economic influence, ideological influence, just as it happens to us all around the world today, where you have even in West Africa, you have in so-called Cameroon, you have French-speaking and English-speaking Africans killing each other, etc. And because the French and the English have competing economic interests, all of that's at play to do. And so that happens today. So today in what is a Dominican Republic, and by the way, Rafael Trujillo, who was responsible for more than 30,000 Africans for Haiti being murdered, because you have the Africans in Haiti now because they're being starved, and now Dominican Republic becomes this example of what freedom could look like as compared to this slave rebellion that overturned the whole system and encouraged Africans and oppressed peoples all around the world. Now the Dominican Republic is being held up as the better alternative. And so it gets a certain kind of support at the expense of Haiti. So now Africans in Haiti, they want to get a job, they have to leave Haiti and they go to this place they call the Dominican Republic that at one time was Spanish Haiti, etc. And then the resentful Africans, they call themselves, the Dominicans, with the same kind of hateful attitudes imposed from outside, now have an economic interest in killing Africans who are coming from Haiti because they're destroying our economy, they're taking our jobs and this kind of madness, and they Black. And we ain't. And this is the mythology. And it doesn't make any sense, but it does. And this is the power of philosophy, the power of ideology. This is something that's why it's so important for us to come to terms with that and to come to understand that we are Africans. That's our identity, African people. We liquidate all of this racial nonsense that's been imposed on us for the basis of controlling us. And anyway, that's more or less what it is. Comrade Diop, I hope I spoke to it a little bit.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Comrade Diop, for that question. And just really, really appreciate that answer, Chairman. And with this whole thing we're talking about ideas and philosophy and things like that, I mean, just in terms of what we read today, the significance of why we have to carry out this strategy is critical, because the only way to win the war of ideas is to have this effective apparatus. So
it's so powerful that we got Africans in the United States calling themselves some kind of Ottos, the ascendants, what is it called, of the American
descendants
slaves.
Yeah.
And I was in a meeting yesterday, a wonderful meeting, and we have these African women from Nigeria who, they wanted to talk to the question of reparations, but felt like they couldn't do it because they were, their parents came from Nigeria, and they couldn't be the center of this discussion because the Black people who live in America were the ones who, how the hell, first of all, Nigeria was created as a part of the process of the attack on Africa that's responsible for there being such a thing as the so-called African American. The Africans are owed reparations because of the attack on Africa. I didn't just pop up in the United States. The war was started against Africa. And so it's all of ours. And this is the war of ideas is critical. It's like I mentioned Cameroon, mentioned this thing that's happening in the United States, and you see evidence of this thing reflected in all of our lives. And this is the ideas that stem from a colonial capitalism, and this is what we have to break out of. That's why the revolution is so important, and we have to be on every front. And the African revolution has to be everywhere. And this nonsense, and we have to break down all these barriers, ideological, philosophical, geographical. All these barriers, all these borders have to be busted up, and only the African People's Socialist Party and African internationalism can do that. Uhuru.
Thank you so much, Chairman. And speaking on that question of reparations, we go into this next question that came from Comrade Mwambi. Again, this is from last week's study. And he asked, the 1982 World Tribunal proved the US is guilty of genocide. How do Africans start genocide and the African reparations claim, which are both campaigns of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, advance that and build what you characterize as democracy above and socialism below?
You know, in the final analysis, we're going to have to take our freedom. And that means and freedom is more than just an idea. We have to be able to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. And what has the essential component of the war against us is to rob us of that ability to do that. Somebody else has imposed its will on us so that we can't even do that. And they have expropriated all the value that we create. You know, and that's what the main human society is motivated more than anything else by the struggle to create and recreate life. And Africa has only been able to create and recreate life for Europe and for white people and white power. And so the point is, and how did this happen? There was no vote. They didn't go to any Congress and say that this was going to happen, except the Congresses that the colonizers set up for themselves that spread their ability to prevent wars among themselves to depopulate and steal all of our resources. So America was built. Where did the startup capital come from for this capitalism? Through slavery, through killing the indigenous peoples and things like that. There was no Congress where the indigenous people and what they call the Louisiana Project Purchase that was forced upon France, because France owned much of that, and all that territory that included Missouri and much of the land west of east of the Mississippi. All of that land that came about wasn't because of some discussion that happened with the indigenous people who live in there. I mean, France had to relinquish control of this. And by the way, that was something like, I think, $15 million or something that Jefferson purchased that made the Louisiana Purchase. That's Thomas Jefferson. That's the rapist. That's the pedophile that's so glorified by America today. And he paid less for that than what France charged for reparations for African people, taking back our own land, our own free source, our own lives, our own labor from France. So we had to pay in reparations to France more than what France paid, what the United States paid to France for taking land that was inhabited by the indigenous people. They had no Congress that said that this is how we're going to get it. They took it. This is where the primitive accumulation of capital came from that created the whole capitalist system. This was parasitic capitalism. So my point is, yes, we will use whatever means that we can. We will use these questions of political questions. When you look at the issue of the genocide convention that didn't have anything to do with us when it was created. It was white people who pushed that genocide convention to pay for what white people had done to white people in order to moderate and the relationships that existed between white powers stealing other people's resources. That's what it was for. But the point is that it's a political thing that we raise up. And we say, look, this is what the Genocide Convention said, that when you do these acts, it's genocide, and that genocide is a crime, they say. And of course, the crime is what is crime? It's something that's defined, it's the opinion of the ruling class. And whoever is the ruler at any given time says this is a criminal act and that's a criminal act. Slavery was a crime after the slave masters lost control and authority assumed another form. So the point I'm making is that once we win this whole question among our own people and using in the world, using as an example this convention against genocide, where it's clear, even if you talk about what happened to the Jews in the Second Imperialist World War during that whole time frame, some 6 million Jews, Leopold of Belgium killed 11 to 15 million African people. This was at a time where many of the Jews were Germans. And so the point is that that had nothing to do with us, and that we have to get our resources back. And so we use this political mechanism and we win as much as we can in terms of public opinion around the genocide that's committed against African people. and the genocide committed against African people in the United States is part of the political encirclement that we want to create, the diplomatic encirclement around the United States, which is becoming more and more important today, as you see the United States doing certain kinds of things, attacking China, the Uyghurs, and other kinds of things, because it's in this contest with China, and using these, as you see Putin recently in this debate with Biden, talking about the treatment of Black people that resulted in the so-called Black Lives Matter movement. You see growing in a contest between these great powers against each other. And here we are as African people, we have to be clear about what our interests are, and then we take advantage of this split and create greater diplomatic isolation in the United States, where the Russians and Chinese and everybody else in the struggle against the United States, and this struggle is growing daily, not only against the United States, but against European and colonial powers. This struggle is going daily. So we say genocide, genocide, genocide. And we want the Russians to say, yeah, genocide, genocide. And we want the Chinese to say, and we want all the peoples around the world say, yes, the United States is creating genocide. Not because we think China or Russia is going to free us, because it gives us greater space and it isolates the United States as we make struggle against it. And so that's part of what it is that we're talking about. And we want the reparations, and we want to, this is an all-encompassing struggle, and this is what the party is about, that distinguishes it from just a simple act. Revolution is not an event. It is not an act, it's a process. And the party has initiated a revolutionary process, and that's part of it, Comrade Mwambi. I hope that was helpful. Push them, push the genocide. Yeah, make everybody sign the petition. Everybody listening to this should make sure that you should send out information, get that petition about genocide. And this is your way of contributing to the liberation struggle, because you are conscious that it's more than just a signature on there. You're contributing to diplomatic isolation of the United States that's escalating in its war against peoples around the world daily. It holds up that regime right now in Myanmar. Just killed more than 130 some odd people just yesterday. And all of the reaction that we see happening in the world, much of it in anyway is centered around the US. And so that's why we have to do that, Mwambi. I hope that was helpful.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much. And thank you, Comrade Mwambi, for the question. And diplomatic isolation, I love that. That's perfect, Chairman. Thank you. So before we get into our next question, just want to also acknowledge some other cities and plate locations that checked in: Louisiana, North Carolina, Grenada, West Indies, Australia, Rockford, Illinois, Boston, Massachusetts, and Huntsville, Alabama, and Atlanta, Georgia. So
well, I want to shout out to comrades, brothers and sisters in Australia. I just read something the other day. It's really interesting because, Africans in the United States have been reluctant to take that vaccine. I'm not speaking for or against that at this point, but they've attributed to Africans unwilling to take the vaccine in the United States. They say because of the Tuskegee experiment, well, we know what they did and allowed all these African people to be infected with syphilis, and then not telling about it because this was their experiment. And then and so the Africans and people today, they're so smart, they're so clever. They're saying, well, Africans in the United States won't do it because of Tuskegee. But then I read that in Nigeria, they're refusing too. So many people in Nigeria refusing to take the vaccine. And the people in Nigeria are saying, no, we're not going to be used as some kind of your laboratories, as your guinea pigs and what have you, because you've done it to us before. And then I look up and I read about Australia and what they call the Aboriginal African people. They're refusing to take the vaccine. It had nothing to do with Tuskegee. It has to do with colonial domination of Black people, of African people around the world. And we suspect everything that you do, because you've never come to help us. Never, 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 never come to help us. So all you bring all the scientists you want to tell us how wonderful you are today. In this instance, while you're killing us in the streets all around the world and every place, but now you really have good intentions to help us. Sure you do. And so you bring the scientists and you bring ordinary people who say, that's your science, but my science is based on the fact that historically you've never come to do anything good for us. And then when you brought us good science before, it was designed to kill us, like the Dr. Death in South Africa, where they set up clinics all over South Africa that were supposed to cure AIDS and actually were infecting people with AIDS. So it got nothing to do with Tuskegee. It's got to do with colonialism and the genocide that Comrade Mwambi just talked about, that that's used against us all around the world, including and especially in places like Australia, where you got a whole white population living high off the hog as a consequence of bleeding, killing, murdering our people, and stealing all our resources. Yeah, we don't trust you. And it seemed to me that the best scientific evidence we got are the bodies, the graves, the history of murder that you've imposed on us. You don't have enough science to liquidate that. You understand? So that's the thing that we know. We have been your guinea pigs forever. So let us see that you take little white children and white people and then guinea pig them and then say, okay, it worked. Let us see that it worked, and then we might have more confidence in. We know there's a greater likelihood of it be true if you use the white people as guinea pigs, and we'll sit back and watch and see what happened to the white people and say, well, okay, they seem to have survived it. Although even that would be suspicious because we know that they can do stuff that's genetic specific in terms of who it attacks and doesn't attack. But that's the reality that we are faced with. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Yeah, they got these, they got people like Bush and then taking sugar water shots. Trying to get you to go get your vaccines. Uhuru, Chairman. Uhuru. So this next question, now we're at the questions from today. So Comrade Leah in Minneapolis, Minnesota asks, Uhuru Chairman, can you comment on the city of Evanston, Illinois, which is paying reparations to quote unquote eligible Black households? How do we combat the thinking in the white community that this payment is enough to repair the damage of colonial capitalism?
Uhuru. First of all, I want to send a shout out to Comrade Leah. She's coming in solidarity work, and I've seen her, take some really courageous and bold stances and taking the reparations demand out to the North American, the settler colonial population there in solidarity with the African struggle. This issue of Evanston is a little more complex, I believe. And in terms of white people thinking that somehow that's all the reparation that's owed us. The fact is the settler colonialists who unite with the existing social system and the existing arrangement will never be satisfied. There's nothing that can happen that will satisfy them, not like that. So I think that what has to happen is what you're doing, Leah, and you have to just continue to support the African revolution, support the African liberation movement and demand reparations. And despite what they're saying, the support that you give to the African revolution makes the African revolution stronger and stronger and stronger. And the stronger the African revolution get, as expressed through the party and the Uhuru movement, the greater the likelihood that white people will be able to recognize how precarious the situation is that does not recognize the legitimacy of the demand of Black people. That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of the question, because, let's think about it. Everybody has been satisfied with the setup, with the arrangement until Twin Towers happened, till Minneapolis happens, till Black people revolting happened. And this is the only time you see white people have to reconsider their ideas. And so the strength of the revolution itself is what would challenge the notions, the ideas that white people have. The strength of the revolution is what challenges the existing kind of social system, the way that the white world, the colonizer, the colonial capitalist system achieves its wherewithal, the society's ability to feed itself. And so at that point, then the ideas of the society become more or less viable. And they become increasingly less viable in the strength of the revolution. So then the ideas of white people and African people too become something that's more likely to be changed and influenced, because people have to try to keep up with the times, whether they want to or not. And so that's one aspect of it. But the other thing I want to say is this whole question about legalized marijuana, because this is becoming a great debate. And I remember this guy's name is Edward Bernays, I think his name was. And he was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. He's been called a master of the father of spin. He was a great propagandist and has written on propaganda. And one of the clever things that he did was the cigarette industry wanted to have more people smoke cigarettes. And in order to do that, they wanted to increase this market by getting women to smoke cigarettes because there were not enough women smoking cigarettes. It was a male-dominated kind of thing. It wasn't a woman's thing to do. And so what he did was create this whole scheme where he would make smoking cigarettes a way for women's liberation. And so he's actually got media to cooperate and had women marching down the streets in Manhattan, smoking cigarettes, et cetera, as this defiant act that spoke to women's liberation, that now you want to smoke so you can be free, and that's what it was all about. So it created this whole thing about women smoking, and that's being a way to more freedom. And now we have a situation, and it did enhance the profit margin of the whole cigarette industry. Now we got more women smoking, et cetera, who doing it and thinking that it speaks to their being freedom. And now you've got the situation where thousands, perhaps millions of African people have been in prisons, are in prison because of marijuana convictions, et cetera, because it was bad. And so what's happening now is the United States government has decided to legalize marijuana. And to do that, part of what they are doing is they're saying now the Africans can get a piece of the action. And that somehow the right to sell marijuana is a statement of your freedom. So you can make money off marijuana too. But the problem is that everything that you're talking about is talking about just finding another way to engage in capitalist industry. It doesn't undermine capitalism. And in fact, what it does is who's going to be doing the marijuana? Who's going to be smoking the marijuana? Well, everybody can smoke it now. But the fact is, in every African community in the world, you will find in these communities more liquor stores, more churches, and more dope smoking and dealing. That's obvious anyway, because people are trying to cure their pain living under colonialism. So if you have legalized marijuana, sales, and you can get a piece of the action because now it makes you free, because now you've penetrated, because we paid such a price, now we should be able to sell dope legally now. The fact is that they want Africans and people to be doing dope because there have been places and times in the world where people were fed certain kinds of narcotics because it make them more pliable and willing to work, and you endure the worst kinds of circumstances that not going to be changed in the real world. If you're not going to change the real world, change the perception in the brains of the oppression of the oppressed about the real world, so that you can stay high all the time. And that's who's going to stay high, either high of marijuana, high of liquor, high of religion, high of anything other than freedom. And so what we're saying is that there is no economic project. And first of all, even if you get one say, let you do it, you're not going to, that's a market that the imperialists and capitalists are going to control, and just give you a piece of the action to make it something that's more acceptable to those of us who are oppressed by this relationship. So I wanted to say that about Everton too, because it's much more complex, I believe, than how it's been put forward. So you can get now reparations payments from selling reefer, selling marijuana that they used to put you in jail for, and that's supposed to be reparations. And that's, in my view, not an accurate kind of assessment of what it is that we're dealing with. So in terms, there are two aspects of that. In terms of the colonizer population, it's going to be very little that you can say directly to them about changing their minds. And I know I went through the whole thing in the 50s and the 60s, invite a Black person to dinner so that your friends can meet them. And then anytime somebody that you know says something negative about a Black person, they say nigger, you say, no, 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 you don't do that. And you change their minds, and that's supposed to change things in the real world. But what would change things in the real world, and we've seen it happen, is the growth of the liberation movement of African people. That's the thing that's going to help those people who are saying that they should be satisfied with the reparations that they get from selling dope to themselves, et cetera. That's the thing that's going to change it. It's the power, the strength of the revolution. Keep doing what you're doing, Comrade Leah. Support the African Revolution. Support the African People's Socialist Party. Support the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Support this effort. Support the African People's Solidarity Committee. This is on the right, this puts you on the right track. This is the thing that will make the difference in what your white friends or what allies and family members and anybody else think. It's the strength of this movement that will do it. And this movement is stronger by far as a consequence of your participating in it and people like you who you bring into this movement. That's the thing that makes it stronger. And you know yourself, your participation in this movement has helped to transform you and your understanding of this reality we're contending with. Uhuru, thank you, Leah.
For real. Thank you, Chairman. And yes, thank you, Comrade Leah, for your question. So I'm going to move it now, Chairman, to the next question that comes from Comrade Life. And he asks, should party members try to get the spear into the hands of the African petty bourgeoisie? If so, please discuss why and maybe suggest best methods.
Uhuru. Thank you, Comrade Life. Yeah, we should get the spear into the hands of the African petty bourgeoisie for two reasons. One, first, is because the African people are oppressed as a whole nation. That includes the African petty bourgeoisie. And even though much of the African petty bourgeoisie has been won to this relationship that we have to capital philosophically, ideologically, have been won to that, have been won to an assumption that as bad as things are, despite the fact that I can't get the kind of contracts that white people get, despite the fact that my children are not going to go to the same school the white people go to, and even if they do, they're not going to do as well. The fact is that we are oppressed as a colonized people. And the African petty bourgeoisie experiences colonization, but you can satisfy the aspirations of the African petty bourgeoisie without it speaking to the aspirations and the needs and requirements of the African workers and poor people around the world. So the thing is that African petty bourgeoisie as a social force, as a class, will always betray the revolution. The African petty bourgeoisie as a class will always betray the revolution. The African petty bourgeoisie as a class will always betray the revolution, but there are individuals who are of the African petty bourgeoisie who can commit class suicide. They can abandon the interests of the petty bourgeoisie, which is a dying social force in the first place, which is one of the things that drives them to a frenzy and states of desperation, and they can unite with the aspiration and the interests of the African working class. So they may be born into the petty bourgeoisie. They may have grown up part of the petty bourgeoisie, which is a real flimsy state of existence under colonial domination anyway, but they can commit class suicide. And we've seen people who do that. Many of the great leaders that we know of in the whole world were able to do that and become leaders of a working class based revolution. So we want the African petty bourgeoisie to discover itself and to discover the relationship it has with the African nation, and therefore the relationship it has to colonialism. So the petty bourgeoisie should know that. The petty bourgeoisie should be given the courage through this to be able to be armed philosophically, ideologically, in the struggle that we are engaged in against colonialism itself. And then, of course, those sectors that can be won can be brought into under the leadership of the African working class directly. So those are some of the reasons that we want to do that. In terms of how we do that, we got explanation the petty bourgeoisie doesn't have. The petty bourgeoisie always ask me to come talk about this, talk about that, talk about this. They want me to talk about it because it enhances their struggle or their sense of value, or sense of self in the struggle against colonialism. So they will recognize the righteousness of the struggle against colonialism. They just don't, they're more afraid of the of the working class coming to power. That's the fear that they have. And I can't help them on that question, but they don't have that kind of confidence in us in the first place. But if we can win them to a struggle against colonialism, and that's what we want to do, they read the Burning Spear. They listen to the things that we have to say. I don't know how many thousands of them have watched the Oxford. I hear from them all the time. They saw Oxford, and Oxford was really uplifting for them because it showed them also that they're not alone, that there's a whole African worldwide nation that's a part of the struggle, and how part of the condition that we suffer from a consequence of what colonialism has imposed on. So they love that. That really energizes them and gives them, a lot of hope for possibilities in the future. So we can introduce them. It ain't that hard because they ain't got nothing else really that they can look to that even contributes to the African petty bourgeoisie feeling good about itself. I could name some names of people who try to do that, but that wouldn't be fair. Uhuru. I hope that was helpful.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Life, for your question. We got about 10 minutes left, Chairman, so I'm gonna move it right now to the next question. This comes from Comrade Eugene in Branson, Missouri. And he asks, are you a proponent of gun control? I revert to history, which shows you strip a population of their weapons and abilities to defend themselves, flood their media with propaganda, and that's the beginning process of dictation or reoppression. Do you believe Biden and Harris are the puppets used to impose this strategy?
Well, first of all, I believe in gun control of the colonizer, of the colonial state. Let's control those guns. And one of the ways you control the guns of the colonizer and colonial state, we had at least a brief and important kind of example given by Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party when they showed up with guns. The police had guns and we had guns, and that was really a neutralizing thing for how the police acted. And then we saw with the Black Liberation Army in New York when the police were killing us all over the place, and the Black Liberation Army declared that anytime an African was killed by a cop was going to be killed by the BLA. And they started that, and then you saw immediate cessation, or certainly the subsidizing, we saw the limit imposed on how police were killing African people. So that was a reality. But yeah, I mean, the fact is that the controlling weapons and things like that for that in the hands of African people who are colonized and colonized peoples of the world has always been a strategic significance. I mean, I remember when even Nicaragua, after the revolution, couldn't even get computers because the US government was declaring that they could use computers to make weapons of mass destruction. And they did that to the whole world, to eliminate the ability of the people to be able to defend themselves against colonialism. That's even the pacifism that we find running around us all the time, these wonderful pacifists who loved everybody, etc., that they want to make sure that the colonized never get guns and never get weapons to be able to protect ourselves. So yeah, that's what Biden, that's what Kamala Harris, that's what all of them are about. And but to say that doesn't make them special because colonialism does everything it can and use every means and method that it can to immobilize the African people's ability to defend ourselves. And the gun control is just one of the minor things that it's doing, because mind control, ideological control, controlling African people's political aspirations, understanding of the reality we're confronted with, that's the most powerful weapon in their hands. Because somebody who's enslaved will learn how to get the weapons to free ourselves. It's the thing that keeps us enslaved, that keeps us locked ideologically, mentally, psychologically. That's the thing that we have to overcome, because the rock, a sling, as the mythological of David used against Goliath, you come up with a weapon once you understand that you are enslaved and that you cannot find freedom under slavery within the system of slavery. That's the real issue that that's the danger of a Biden, who is responsible for all these African people being in prison right now. That's the danger of a Kamala Harris, who is responsible for all these Africans being in prison today. Not the fact they say you can't have a gun, but the fact that you say you can't have freedom, you can't have your own party, you can't have your own organization, you can't have independence. Once you understand you can have independence, you can get whatever it takes for you to get free. You will use your imagination and creativity, and Africans have done that historically. So that's, yeah, they don't want us to have guns. So that's the way that it works. That's the way it always has worked. That's the way it will work, as long as somebody oppresses us. And when we come to power, we're going to take their guns away from them as well, and put a lot of them in jail, those who survive. Uhuru.
True. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade.
That was Eugene?
Yeah, that was Eugene. Mm-hmm.
I think I know who Eugene is.
Yeah. We know Eugene.
You know Eugene.
All right, so we have just a couple minutes left, Chairman. I'll take one more question and then we'll go ahead and move to our close. This came from Comrade Kat and in Newark, New Jersey, and Kat asks, how do we seek higher education under the oppressor's curriculum without losing purpose? That's the question.
Well, the main thing I think is really important is when we talk about education, we're talking about the question of power, ultimately. We work with some real dear friends who understand that the issue has to be to have control of that. That's part of the neutralizing or negating influence of the colonial state itself, because Comrade Betty, who is a part of the Black Spike Coalition, Betty Davis, she always says that cats do not educate mice, they eat them. And so when you have a situation where the oppressor is supposed to be educating you, it's not educating you for your freedom, your liberation. So the objective has to be, even when you pursue the question of education, it has to be for the purpose of negating the power of the colonizer. The cat must be defanged and what have you. That's a part of that process has to be about that. And so it gives you a strategic purpose. So that, and then that's one aspect of it. It's a crucial aspect of it. And the other thing, Comrade Cat, that we have to recognize is that the party, has to be creating and fighting for the ability to govern. And sometimes that would be as the party, and sometimes that would be as forces who are really working to create genuine self-government, genuine struggle to negate the authority of the colonizer, colonial state, even as it relates to education, which some people recognize as the soft state, as opposed to like the hard state in the form of the police and things like that. We want to have control of that for ourselves, but it means that we're going to have to negate, overturn, or get rid of the state as it reflects, as it comes from the colonizer. And that has to happen in the form of education as well. So the fact is that the struggle around education is just a component part of the struggle against colonialism overall. And so what that means, again, is that we have to fight for the power of our education, negate the influence and power of the colonizer. And part of the thing that we recognize is true, that African people created the so-called public education system in this country, and that the majority of the people rely on this system as a means of achieving education. And that we can fight for control of that process as a part of the overall struggle against colonialism. And that's something that we have to engage in. And there are various kinds of institutions, instruments, and components to that fight for control that include things like PTAs and et cetera. There are all kinds of economic things that's involved in that in terms of controlling the school budgets and the possibilities of how that might impact on education. White people do it on a regular basis. They get up and say, you can't have this book in your library. You can't have this as a part of the education process. And we have to achieve the kind of organization to begin to do that as a part of the process of negating the colonial control and authority over the education process African people are experiencing. I know that was a rather involved kind of answer, Kat, but I hope it's helpful. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And thank you to Comrade Kat for your question. So Chairman, we only have a couple of minutes left, so that's going to be the last question that we take, but we do have lots more questions to look at for next week. So I'll go ahead, Chairman, and give it to you for any closing words before we go to our announcements.
Just want to thank you, Comrade Director, and for being there, and again, for being just a material manifestation of what it is that the party means, that we are a real, actual organization in the real world. And these are not just ideas that we're throwing around, but they're real human beings who are part of a real organization of the African working class as building this freedom. And I also want to send a special shout out to all of the Africans who are part of our movement and not, but a part of our party throughout Africa, throughout the Caribbean, in places like Australia and throughout the United States and Europe. And you have to help us become better at what we do. You have to begin sending articles to us for our newspaper, and you have to make yourself available for discussions with whatever radio medium that we have access to as well. So I want to thank you, comrades, and thank you, Comrade Director Akilia Nai, for just being there and just being an incredible leader that you have been. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much again for this incredible study. Thank you for this whole section, about the direction and way forward for the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, and that this is not just something that I needed to listen to, but as you said, something that the party and the movement will have to internalize and will struggle to carry it out, because that's the way that it's going to be effective. Build the army of propagandists is the objective, and to build the governing, the state function of the Ministry of Communication, as you've characterized it. So thank you so much, Chairman. And again, because of time, I want everyone to know that if your question was not answered, that we will be taking it in the beginning of, in the beginning of the Q&A portion of next week's study. So do not fret, we will get to your question. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, where we're winning the war of ideas. For your revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. And for revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple or Android, or online at blackpower96.org. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. So if you like what you heard today, Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuru.org, to fill out our contact form. You can order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, the Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, and other publications, works by the chairman and leaders of our movement, at burningspearmarketplace.com. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations is convening their 5th electoral campaign school virtually on April 10th and 11th, 2021. The Electoral Campaign School is a means by which we open up a new front in the struggle for Black self-determination within the US and elsewhere. With the Electoral Campaign School, the coalition challenges the monopoly of the electoral arena by a select segment of our community that has special ties to capitalist white power. Register for this school at blackisbackcoalition.org. On Saturday and Sunday, April 17th and 18th, 2021, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will host its annual national convention under the theme, Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. USM is the mass organization of white people formed by and working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to build the movement for white reparations to African people. The USM convention will feature keynote presentations by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Solidarity Committee Chairwoman, Penny Hess. For more information, go to uhurusolidarity.org. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. We are calling on people to follow the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus, COVID-19. APDUP has recently launched an international telehealth program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Like and follow the Lowezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Lowezi Kinshasa does frequent live events such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French also. To get alerts of when SG Lowezi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. Looking for more opportunities for live political education from Chairman Omali Yeshitela? Tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Chairman Omali Yeshitela Facebook like page and the Burning Spear TV YouTube page with Chairman's address to the African nation, discussing important topical issues and providing us with an African internationalist analysis. Lastly, to keep up with our movement events, visit the burningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study.